The evolution of transport, or the history of movement in Minecraft. In this video, we will understand how mammoths traveled or got from point A to B in Minecraft from the earliest versions to today. What did players use, and what mechanisms did they invent in order to reduce the time of movement? From simple methods of transportation to more advanced and crazy ones that allow players to teleport thousands of blocks in seconds. Interested? Then click like and subscribe to the channel. This is Turtlecraft. To begin, we need to talk about the easiest and earliest ways to move added to the game. Pre-Classic 2009, most of the audience was not even born yet, and in the game it was already possible to build primitive structures. Walking and jumping speed was 4.317 meters per second. This speed does not change even nowadays. It seemed that this was the only way to move, but in the game there was a function to respawn at a random point on the map by pressing R, in case you want to know what is at the end of the world. A strange way of moving, but this only makes it more interesting. Classic is released in the same year. Reworked the teleport function. It is now possible to save your current position and teleport to it at any time by pressing Enter. This allows you to teleport from one point of the world to another in a matter of seconds, but no one says how it got there. I think thanks to this function, it was possible to build and be creative faster. But this is all in a limited world. In 2010, the Infdev version of the game was released. The world becomes infinite and procedurally generative, so the journey seemed to become more boring. However, this version features the first minecart with rails, but it was only used for item storage, as right-clicking opened a chest that could be filled and pushed. Also in this version, the first vertical movement using a ladder appears. The bucket made it possible to carry water sources and make water lifts, but they are extremely slow. The first dungeon with a spawner and chests in which you can find a saddle and ride a pig, but you cannot control it. After 6 days, the minecart texture and mechanics were changed to riding, removing the ability to store items. In June, the alpha version of the game was released, and it was a breakthrough. Redstone appeared, the first primitive mechanisms, new mechanics and new transport, thanks to which the game became even more interesting. It is now important to surprise us, but at that time it was a wow effect. I'll start with driving a minecart. It can be divided into two types. The first is the usual descent from the slide and pushing the cart, which is not the most interesting. A minecart with furnace appears in the game. By using coal, she drove in the directed direction and pushed the carts in front of her. But it doesn't matter how much coal they put in. She drove for exactly 3 minutes at the same speed, but walking will be faster. And the second type is much more interesting. The players realize that in minecart, there is a hitbox that can be pushed and also with which you can push. Without thinking long, a primitive mechanism was created thanks to which a minecart could be given an infinite impulse at the expense of another minecart that was driving nearby. Such movement could be made in any direction, and based on this, a subway or a roller coaster could be built. It seemed that the minecart were exhausting their potential. However, thanks to the mechanics of transferring from one minecart to another, such a mechanism appears. Pressing the right mouse button moves the player, but there is a slight delay. However, if you click, the movement will be quite fast. As you have already seen, it was also possible to turn the boat that appeared in the game, but it could easily be moved by animals or the player himself, which would interfere with normal movement. Once it came to the boat, the game features movement on water, but the control was too terrible, and the boat could easily crash. But this did not prevent players from automating the movement process. With the help of water flows, the boat moved in a given direction. YouTuber EthosLab has created a brilliant and advanced method of transportation using boats and choosing the direction of travel. It seems to me that due to the incremental addition of things to the game, players were pushing the limits of how efficient and automatic travel methods could be. Vertical movement has also undergone changes. Water bodice with plates, teleport between minecarts, water lift on the boat, and most importantly, a new dimension of nether appeared in the game. Thanks to him, it became even faster to travel, since 1 block is equal to 8 in the normal world. Also, the combination of the above-mentioned methods in the nether makes traveling more and more interesting and fast. Strange and interesting things in this version. Circular rails allow you to reduce the distance between the rails, and due to this, movement is faster. However, it takes a long time to build this path, and it does not work in all parts of the world. Another camera constantly looks from left to right. Maybe it can even make someone sick. TNT cannon, but instead of a core, the player needs to be shot in a specific place. However, expensive pleasure has its place in the game. Launchpad on boats. It works on the principle of pushing away from itself, and since there are many boats and they are all in the same city, the player can be pushed away for quite a long distance. But these are lags, and it is quite difficult to balance the system as the boats broke from any wrong movement. Carefully, the following shots will be old school. A classic anti-AFC system that moves the player around the block, thanks to which players could stand in AFC on servers and load farms, etc. This system still works today. And there was also an interesting noise with the transfer of time 1 day back and then to automatic. Thanks to this, the game is faster and the whole game is much faster. This is due to the fact that the game was tied to the time on the computer, and the game did not have a tick yet. The first beta version was released at the end of 2010, but changes in movement appear only from beta 1.5, with the addition of powered and detector rails. Another trolley was no longer needed for movement. After all, the powered rail performed this function. Beta 1.7 is my favorite version, and it is from it that my acquaintance with Minecraft begins. Pistons appeared. Many new mechanisms and space for creativity. New unusual way to move piston bolt. A very fast and fully automatic method of movement, however, is not cheap and time-consuming in construction. This method still works today and has a number of advantages with the addition of new items and mechanics. From fully automatic road construction to moving in all directions, elevators on pistons, and other mechanisms on pistons. The latest version of Beta 1.8 has an unusual new line of satiety and sprint, i.e. running. The player can now walk and run with a double dash forward, but it consumes satiety. The combination of running and jumping made it possible to move even faster. However, satiety is also consumed faster. An interesting fact is that a vine has appeared in the game, but it is still impossible to climb it. On November 18, 2011, the first official version of Minecraft was released. Globally, nothing has changed in movement, but there is potion brewing and a speed potion that increases the speed of walking, running, and the length of jumps. The first level by 20% and the second by 40%. Also, the potion of fire resistance made it possible to float on lava and not take damage, in addition to walking on fire. The first legal teleportation in survival appeared thanks to Ender Pearl. When pearls landed, the player teleported and took damage. In version 1.2.1, it became possible to climb a vine, provided there is a solid block there. 1.4 added a carrot on a stick to the game, and now players can ride and control pigs. This rod had the capacity of a pig eats a carrot, and at the end, I get a regular fishing rod. And perhaps the most unexpected thing is that you can add unbreaking to a carrot on a stick through an anvil. This is a discovery even for me, because I have almost never traveled on a pig because it is very slow but funny. Trapdoors can now be placed at the top of a block, providing a new and faster way to move. Running with a jump on ice with trapdoor speed is 15.5 meters per second. I gain such speed due to the fact that the distance from the floor to the trapdoor is equal to the hitbox, and due to the jump, a push is given. But immediately from the trapdoor, I land on the ice and spend a minimum amount of time on the flight. The only drawback is satiety. The next version that added new mechanics in movement is the 1.6 horse update. From the name, you can already understand that horses, donkeys, and mules appeared in the game. Horses differed in speed, loudness, and amount of HP, but it was necessary to choose between these characteristics because the combination of all this in one horse is almost real. The donkey and the mule move at the same speed, but the donkey can be hung with an auxiliary travel chest, so the donkey was more unique. 1.8 added a slime block, thanks to which crazy and revolutionary mechanisms appeared. Flying mechanisms on which you could fly as much as you wanted, and there were no obstacles on the way, even in AFK. The basic functions of the slime allowed you to jump on it from any height and not take damage, but the inertia remains, so it takes a while to land. Of course, it was possible to make a limit in the form of a ceiling and land faster. Funny mechanisms for pushing or tossing the player in the given direction. TNT guns in the most different variations. Tossing a pearl for a longer throwing distance. And many other cool things. Added a jump potion of the first level in 1.5 blocks and the second 2.5 blocks. A new depth strider enchantment on boots that reduces water resistance. The third level allows the player to move underwater at the speed of a normal walk. 1.9 The players were divided into two camps because not everyone liked the combat update since the attack cooldown mechanic appeared. However, in terms of movement, the game has changed a lot. The boat has not changed fundamentally since the alpha version, that is, for 6 years. And finally, it happened. The texture, appearance, and mechanics have changed. The boat now has two places, that is, you can travel with a friend or transport animals or villagers. The boat can move not only on water and on ordinary blocks. Thanks to the boat, it is now possible to descend from the mountains and not take damage from the fall. The most interesting thing is that the boat moved faster on the ice, and this was a bug that was worked on and made into a full-fledged game mechanic. They mined ice with a silk touch, built in the Nether Hyperloop, and quickly traveled thousands of blocks. This method of movement is relevant today. Running on water has become a reality thanks to the new enchanted Frostwalker, which creates frozen ice when you step on water. This ice has all the properties of ordinary ice. It also works with the stand if pushed. Frozen ice cannot be obtained even with the Silk Touch enchantment. Also, this ice melts in sunlight. Update the end, now there is a benefit from it. It is possible to get chorus fruit, which when eaten teleports the player to a random place on a solid block within a radius of 8 meters blocks. Now it is a very popular food on 2B2T, but that is another story. Elytra appeared, which could be found in the End City. These are buildings similar to castles. They allowed to soar through the air or smoothly land from a height. However, players quickly got used to the combination of a bow with an enchanted knockback. The developer had no choice but to add a full-fledged mechanic on fireworks to the game in the next version 1.11. For some players, this will be a novelty, however. Fireworks have 3 types of power, i.e. for the first you need 1 gunpowder and for the third 3. In addition, if you add a firework star, the player receives damage at the end of the firework action. Elytra launcher is based on boats in a pile that push the player away and give a starting push for flight. This still works today. A new llama mob, you won't be able to ride, more precisely you won't be able to control a llama like a horse. However, you can break up a large caravan and drag other players along. Few people used it, and even today it is not too interesting. The next version 1.12, nothing has changed in movement. However, players have created new mechanisms for movement. The first dupes of TNT machines appeared and based on them huge eaters of the world to extract everything that is on the way. The fastest way to move today in Minecraft in survival mode, created by players for version 1.12.2. The mechanism is called Faster Than Light by YouTuber XCOM6000 and a team of players on the Psycraft server. This mechanism teleports 88,065 blocks in 28.1 seconds, and the speed of such movement is 3,134 meters per second. Thanks to simultaneously detonated 1040 TNT, the Ender Pearl flies to such a distance, but you need to load chunks over the entire distance while the pearl flies, because in unloaded chunks the pearl will simply hang. If this mechanism is launched in the Nether, then this distance will be 8 times greater, i.e. 704,000 blocks or almost 25,000 meters per second. It sounds incredible, but this YouTuber did not stop there and made a mechanism called the end cannon. The principle of operation is similar to the previous mechanism, but here 102,400 TNT are simultaneously detonated, which allowed the pearl to accelerate up to 1,760,000 meters per second. If all this is transferred to the ordinary world, then the speed will already be more than 10 million meters per second. To get to the world border as quickly as possible. If you are interested in the topic of the fastest and slowest ways to travel, there is a separate video I recommend watching. The link will be at the end. The next version is 1.13, which is called Aquatic Update. A new swimming animation appeared in the game, but it was not just an animation, but a new way of moving. Swimming speed doubled. You could meet dolphins in the water. Swimming next to them gave the dolphins grace effect, which significantly decreases the amount of friction from moving through water. Thanks to this, the speed increased to 9.8 meters per second, which is faster than sailing on a boat. With a combination of the Depth Strider 3 enchantment, the speed reached about 37 meters per second. And if you swim along the bottom, the speed will reach 70 meters per second. These are quite interesting indicators. Fast water elevators appeared in the game. Soul sand was pushed out of the water, and magma blocks, on the contrary, lowered the player or objects while receiving air from the bubbles. That is, it will not be possible to suffocate in such water. But players almost did not use magma blocks for descent, because it is easier to jump into water or half a block, or even onto a chest filled with water. Turtle shell is not a method, but thanks to it, the player could stay underwater for 10 seconds longer, that is, hold his breath longer. A new block of blue ice on which the boat was already moving at about 70 meters per second. If such a road is built in the Nether, the distance will be 8 times greater. Few people use it, but in this version there is an opportunity to move water sources due to the fact that water can be poured into different blocks and push the block instead of blocking the water. And thanks to these mechanics, create new auto-builders of the flow of water and ice bridges. But frozen ice melts, so it is not advisable to make such bridges in sunlight. Therefore, they will be underground or in the end, since there is no sunlight there. Of course, such ice can melt from other sources of heat, so you have to be careful. And the most interesting thing is the trident. It's a weapon in itself, and a pretty good one at that. However, if you cast Enchantment Riptide, it will be a new way of moving. When thrown underwater, the trident pulls the player along and also allows you to fly in the rain. Some players deliberately used only the trident for traveling, because the elytra are 2 cheats. But if you combine the elytra and the trident in the rain, it will result in free movement, because fireworks are not needed, and the speed of such movement reaches up to 1,000 meters per second, but under the conditions if it is raining. The next version is 1.14, called Village and Pillage. A new mob named Ravager appeared in the game. Players figured out its mechanics and found an unusual and interesting way to move a long distance in a matter of seconds. I would even call it teleportation. It will take too long to explain. There are full videos about this mechanic. The only thing I can say is that the speed of such movement is approximately 1,800 meters per second. They also added a new block similar to a ladder, but more interesting, called scaffolding. I will get 6 pieces of craft made of bamboo and string at once. From the name, you can understand that this block is used in construction due to the fact that the entire structure breaks from one blow. A fairly quick way to build a pillar and climb it. Scaffolding is even used in redstone mechanisms. Quite a useful block. It became possible to climb the vine without attaching to the blocks. In the next version 1.15, called Buzzy Bees, a new block of honey has appeared, similar to the slime block, but with a slightly different functionality. The player, on the contrary, stuck and descended more slowly. This works with drop and other creatures. If you fall from a great height, you may not take damage. And the most important thing is that this block could move blocks next to each other just like slime and not stick to each other. Thanks to this mechanism, a new era began in the construction of mobile mechanisms. That is, fly machines are bigger, more massive. Everything is limited by your imagination. It seemed like an ordinary block, but how useful it is in the game. Big, so interesting Nether update 1.16, because now you can actually start the game from the Nether and kill the dragon. It's interesting. But now it's about movement. In the new Nether Crimson and Warped Forest biomes, weeping and twisting vines can be found. Weeping vines grow from top to bottom and twisting vines vice versa. You can go up and down them like a regular vine. If you jump from a great height on twisting vines, no damage is done. A new Strider mob was added to the game. It can only be found in the Nether. If you put on a saddle and take a warped fungus on a stick, you will be able to control the Strider and walk on the bench quite quickly, but very slowly on normal blocks. By the way, you can add unbreaking and mending to warped fungus on a stick through the anvil. Write in the comments if anyone did this or knew about it. It will be interesting to read. And probably the most effective way of moving in this version appeared, thanks to the new Soul Speed enchanted boots. The enchantment itself made it possible to run on soul sand and soul soil 61.5% faster than on normal blocks. If you combine the grace of a dolphin, depth strider and soul speed, and make a hyperloop with soul soil, then you will get an incredibly fast way of moving more than 100 meters per second. And if you also add speed too, then almost 147 meters per second. Walking or swimming reached an incredible level. Of course, preparing to move like this takes time, but I think it's worth it. A new basalt generator was also added, thanks to which it became possible to make auto builders of roads through lava lakes. This is not a way of moving, but it also has a place in this story. I wanted to touch on snapshots because they also had interesting glitches. The combination of enchantment and hyperloop speed could reach 800 meters per second. Strider on the bench and leaning on the block could be accelerated. Of course, it's a bug, but I couldn't help but tell about it. The next two versions can be combined into one, 1.17 and 1.18, as they had the same name, caves and cliffs. Nothing new was added in movement, but the generation of the world became larger, namely 384 blocks. Huge caves and giant mountains. Nothing new in movement, but the journeys themselves became more interesting. There was a desire to explore this new world. In 1.19, new biomes, new creatures were also added, and in movement only the new Swift Sneak enchantment. That is, this enchantment increases the player's sneak speed by 15% per level. At level 3, the speed will be 75% of normal walking speed. This enchantment is more suitable for building, because you have to sneak a lot. And finally, the latest version 1.20. From the snapshots, I can understand that the camel will appear. Up to 2 players can ride one camel. Camels cannot float on water when being controlled by a player. They can be ridden in water up to 3 blocks deep. In deeper water, the player is automatically dismounted. Camels walk slowly and can sprint. Saddled camels also have the ability of dashing charging. When the player rides them, the experience bar on the HUD is replaced by a dashing charging bar. Camels can dash every 2.75 seconds. When dashing, the camel launches up to 12 blocks forward and 1 block upward. For a short time after dashing, the camel cannot sprint. The new bamboo raft is only visually different from the boat, but the mechanics of the boat remain the same. That's the whole story. Tried to cover as many mechanisms and the most important ways of moving as possible. Write in the comments what I may have forgotten or should add to this video. It will be a pleasure to read both for me and for others. The only conclusion I can make is that further transportation or movement in Minecraft will develop only thanks to other creatures, but no one excludes the addition of other enchantments or improving minecart. But that is another story. If you like the video, support it by liking and subscribing to the channel. It will greatly help the development of the channel. Support the next video release on Buy Me a Coffee. Turtlecraft was with you until the next video. In the meantime, you can take a look at what is the fastest and slowest way to travel in Minecraft.